Hey yo, it's Gluke. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about filters. Let's go. Alrighty, here we are back in Ableton. And before we get started, I just want to make a quick announcement about how I'm going to do content on this channel going forward. I'll be completely honest, weekly releases is just unsustainable. And also, I want the projects that I put on the Patreon to actually be like good, not just quick sketches. And so going forward, I'm going to be posting every other week. That way I can put more work into the projects that I give you on Patreon, and I can also work on my own demos because I need to do that. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The reason I wanted to do this video is because I have a song called Ready for the Night that releases today, September 26. And in the song, the main sound in the drop, we ended up making out of some old sampled records, but mainly the flanger effect. So I'll go ahead and play a little snippet of the drop here. So that's the song, and it's that main sound that how that's what we ended up making out of filters. And so I wanted to show you today how you can achieve that same effect. So I've written this project for us, and it's just a bit of a sketch. There's really not much going on here. We've got a quick little verse, what you would call a build, and then we have a simple drop here. Let's go ahead and listen to that.
Why we gotta be in such a rush? Take our time, we can make it work. Slow it down because the song gets heard. Too much. Take our time, take our time. Why we gotta be in such a rush? Take our time, we can make it work. Slow it down because the song gets heard. Too much. Take our time, take our time. Why we gotta be in such a rush? Take our time, we can make it work. Slow it down because the song gets heard. Too much. Take our time, take our time. Why we gotta be in such a rush? Take our time, we can make it work. Slow it down because the song gets heard. Too much. Take our time, take our time.
Okay, so that's the project that we have to work on today. So I wrote this one in G minor. We've got some chords here in the verse, and they're a little bit different than what's going on in the drop here, but that's what kind of gives it the contrast between the verse and the drop. In terms of the sounds that are here, all of these are made using filters. Let's go ahead and dive into what filters are. Filters allow us to manipulate the volume of different frequencies within any given signal. So the way that I made this pad here, I started off with two saw waves, one detune 4, one detune 2. And since this is really, really sharp and buzzy, I wanted it to sit more in the background so that way the vocals could establish themselves as the melody. So what I did is I used a filter here, and the filter I'm using is MG Low 12. And I added a little bit of noise for some context and distortion, compressor. The distortion's not even on actually. Yeah, just a compressor. And so what this filter's doing is it's cutting out all of the high frequencies and letting all of the lower frequencies still come through. And this is a really important way that we can shape our sounds so that way things don't get stacked up in the same frequency band. Now there's a lot of different filter types. As you can see here, just in the normal ones, we have low, we have high, which does the opposite and cuts off the low end, and then we get all of the top. And then we also have two others. One is called band, and this stands for band pass. So this way we're cutting off both ends and we're only letting a certain section of the frequencies come through. And the other one is notch, or I guess we have peak as well. So we also have peak. And this just adds a little EQ spike into our signal. And we also have notch, which does the opposite of peak. But you can already hear with the notch and the peak, this adds another flavor onto the sound that isn't there already just off of the waveforms. And so anytime you hear dubstep basses doing like yoy, 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 that's all from filters because the notes aren't changing. The waveforms usually aren't changing all that much. The main way that you get sounds to articulate themselves in different ways is through filters. And so let me go ahead and set this back to what we had before. This is a pretty standard way to use filters, just making a pluck or cutting off some of the high frequencies. Another way you might see it used is to cut off low-end frequencies and more for processing. So in this case, I don't want any of the sub to actually show up on this pad here, but I do want some low end to come through. So that's why I have it high passed right around 90 hertz. It still lets the wider parts of the chords shine through because that's really where a lot of the bass is, but it's not going all the way into the sub region, and that's just keeping the signal a bit cleaner. Now on this lead is using a band pass instead of a low pass. And that's why it kind of gets that yow 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 sound, is because it's sweeping through the frequencies as it's playing. And I hear this sound being used more and more as of late, just using band passes instead of low pass. And then the last example of like pretty standard filter usage is in the bass here, which is this 303 bass that I've used in videos before. And all this is just a low pass. This is doing the same thing that the first sound we were looking at is doing, except this is just on its own and it's playing really low. Let's go ahead and get a bit more spicy with it. So those are just the basic filters. And if that's all you really wanted to know, you're kind of done with the video. But the way that we made the metallic sound in Ready for the Night actually comes from using the flanger, which is a filter of sorts, but it doesn't work the way that you would think with the other filters. So I have this symphony loop here that I pulled off of Splice, and I'll go ahead and I'll put a spectrum on it, and I'll also go ahead and put a phaser flanger on it. And if I put the spectrum after the phaser, we should be able to see when the spikes show up or what is changing in the spectrum when we add the phaser. So this is what it sounds like without anything. Kind of spooky. Looks like it's kind of just all over the place. There's no real defining movement in the EQ. Now, if I turn on the phaser and we have the dry wet at 100%, and maybe I'll crank the feedback a little bit just so it's a bit more dramatic. Okay, so I put a limiter on it just so that we don't blow our ears out, but if I crank the feedback to 100%, we can see now on the spectrum that something is happening with the phaser. And what it's doing is it's moving EQ spikes on our left and our right channel. So that way it starts to get this kind of sound going. And that's where a lot of the metallic-y sound kind of comes from, is because we're just boosting random frequencies within the loop, and then we can record that and get some cool new sounds out of it. Specifically with the workflow when it comes to the song that we were referencing earlier, I went ahead and did some simple cuts here. And the phaser effect is still pretty light. I'll go ahead and turn down this reverb, and I'll turn the phaser to 100%. And then what I'm going to do is just start messing around with the center and the rate to try to really hone in on some of the frequencies that are being played in this section here. So that way we can get some cool noises out of it. And then we can resample that, put it in our song, and look sick. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and make cuts out of all of these, and then we can go ahead and stash that one for later. And now what I'll do is I will layer this into our drop here, and then we can see how it sounds different from just doing these cuts without any effects on them at all. So this is what our drop sounds like with the unflangered cuts. And then this is what it sounds like with our flangered cuts. So two pretty obviously different timbres here. Let's go ahead and just slap an Einstein on this one. And then maybe what we can do is start to switch back and forth between the flangered ones and the unflangered ones. It's still pretty subtle, but you can hear that there's a different flavor on the ones that were flangered and resampled as opposed to just the dry ones. And I think we can get a bit more ridiculous with this. Let's go ahead and add a flanger at the end. Let's actually go ahead and put it in front of the Einstein. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. What I've done here is I've taken off the phase, so now the left and the right channel spikes are moving at the same pace, and I just did maximum notches, and all it's doing now is just combing up through the frequency as it's playing all at the same time. So we kind of get this weird sort of riser effect out of it. But based on the rate, it's still pretty quick. So if you listen closely, you can definitely make out the sound of this flanger here doing what it does. So like that's pretty ridiculous. For an actual song, I'd probably steer away from doing something this absurd unless this is what I was aiming for. That's essentially how we got the metallic sound for the main lead in Ready for the Night. The real trick to this is just going to be resampling. An easy way to do it in Ableton is to make a new audio track and then set this tab here to resampling, and anything that you have soloed will get recorded. So make sure you hit record arm and then you hit record. And then it just starts listening and you get your recording back. Now, the only other spot that I've really used filters on this project is with the vocals here. And that's because I just kind of wanted them to be a bit wider. They were super duper dry when I pulled them out of Splice, so I added a little bit of echo and reverb. But if I go ahead and turn all of this off, you'll hear how dry the vocals are. And then when I turn it back on, you can hear how much more intentionally placed it feels.
Why we gotta be in such a rush? Take our time, we can make it work. Why we gotta be in such a rush? Take our time, we can make it work.
And so even though this doesn't really change much about the content of the audio, it changes the whole feeling around it. And so here I have a flanger and I also have a chorus. Now the main difference between a flanger and a chorus, because they sound kind of similar, they both kind of give it that wow kind of feel to it. But with a flanger, we actually have EQ spikes that are moving through the frequencies. With a chorus, what it's doing is it's duplicating itself and then playing back the same track, but with a really subtle delay. And that causes the track to phase against itself, which essentially creates the same kind of peak and notch that we're hearing with the phaser, just in a different way. So with a phaser, it's a bit more targeted, whereas with a chorus, it just helps us stack things so that it sounds more spacious. If I turn off the echo and the reverb and I solo these one by one, you'll be able to hear the difference pretty clearly.
Why we gotta be in such a rush? Take our time, we can make it work. Why we gotta be in such a rush? Take our time, we can make it work.
And so for this project, I just opted to use both because I wanted the phaser flanger movement just a bit more in the high end. And then the chorus helped really space out the main body of the sound. I guess what you would call the mids. But I felt like using both of these together kind of created the exact sound that I was looking for. So when I'm using these, and what I would recommend is don't really pay attention to the numbers that are on the modules themselves. Just start turning the knobs and see what you get, because that's really the only way that you're going to learn what these things can do at their full potential. And so now we've pretty much covered all of the sounds here, and we've also covered how to use filters in an introductory kind of way. I'll probably do another video on this topic because this can get super, super deep, and maybe next time we make some Yoi basses. But for now, that is all I have for you today. As always, I'll be putting this project on my Patreon page. For a very small fee of $5 a month, you can get access to all of the projects that I make in this YouTube series, including this one. And I'll go ahead and put this exact version up. It really helps me out and supports the channel. So thank you for those of you who do go check it out. If you found this video helpful or informative, go ahead and like and subscribe. Please make sure you hit the bell so you know when I post new videos, and we'll see ya in the next one.